Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another MTG video. In today's video, I am going to be reviewing Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths. When it comes to the release of a product, there are a bunch of different factors to go over. But first, let's break down what Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths is. Ikoria is the second standard set of 2020. It was announced alongside Theros Beyond Death, Core Set 2021, and Zendikar Rising back in 2019. It was teased as build your own monsters, which we now means both mutate and keyword counters. I'll be talking more about the mechanics here in a second, but the set focuses around giant monsters and is full of fun and surprising cards. When breaking down the set, it's much easier to break it down into topics. Some of the topics I'll be covering today include mechanics, power level, how it interacts with the meta, limited, lore, MTG Arena integration, and more. So, why don't we get into this? Starting off, I want to talk about the mechanics. Now, there are really four main mechanics within the set. For the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to be talking about Mutate, Companion, Cycling, and Ability counters. So starting with Mutate. I think Mutate is fun, but not overpowered. And I think it's good. I think it actually might be a little underpowered due to the amount of removal in Standard. Really, any mechanic that focuses around creatures is going to be kind of downgraded in our current Standard environment where every 3 turns you're being board wiped. So I think that if it was released in a different standard, it could make a much bigger impact in the meta, which will again be a later topic, but I think it's fun, although you can kind of just see them as auras, and I see a lot of people saying Mutate is like the worst thing to ever happen to the game, and I do agree it's a little complicated, which I think is somewhat of a problem, but some people are just complaining about the concept of it, but then these are the same people who really don't complain that much about auras, and these are basically just auras that if you don't want to play them as auras, you can play them as creatures. Now, that's not exactly true, because they don't count as anything on the board, so they don't add devotion or anything, but generally they're actually a little bit better, because they aren't destroyed in, like, enchantment board wipes, and they can't be targeted by enchantment removal, so I think it's fun. The one real deck I built in MTG Arena, or at least one of them, is a Mutate deck that focuses around just mutating all into one, like, hexproof or indestructible creature, and then just winning with that by making it really big and, like, spewing my entire deck onto the battlefield. I'm actually doing a video about that specific deck coming out soon. Now, that's my thoughts on Mutate. I think it's probably one not going to see that much play, but we'll talk about that more when I talk about meta interaction. Next, I want to talk about companions. I think that companions were a very cool idea. I think that I think that there are problems with them. It's kind of like Mutate. I think it can be fun, but I think, first off, the deck building restrictions are a little too restrictive. Like Karuga, who is the Simic one. You have to have things convert a mana cost 3 or greater throughout your entire deck. So you're basically just going to get hit in the face by red. So if you're playing red, you just get an automatic loss. And if you're not playing against red and you're playing against a slower deck, then you're going to get this great advantage. Now, do I think that they are going to see a lot of play? I think 1 or 2 of them could make their way into a deck. Some of them that are less restrictive, such as the one that makes all your creatures have the cat, beast, nightmare, elemental tribal, or they have to have all those tribes. I think that one could actually see play, because if you're running white, and for instance, you're not running any creatures, that can be your companion, and then it's just a creature you can throw down at any time as a blocker if you need it. So I think that that's going to be pretty good. I mean, it might see play in elemental decks. It might see play in, I don't know, maybe a cat deck, although that seems more out of standard. Now, looking at Companion from an out of standard perspective, I think that we could have just avoided a ton of confusion by just saying, sorry, companions don't work in Brawl or Commander. You can use them as your commander, but you cannot have them as a companion. They are trying to imitate Commander in Standard, and by allowing them to imitate Commander in Commander, it kind of causes problems. So I think it would have been just generally better if they would have not been allowed in Brawl, and it would have made the rulings a lot more clear that they're just in your sideboard. Because right now it's like, are they in your sideboard? But Commander doesn't have sideboard, so yeah. Next, I want to talk about cycling. It's a fun addition. It's also, like, what I like about the mechanic is that you can build the deck around it. Now, I don't think there's going to be a meta deck around cycling, although with Shark Typhoon and a bunch of other fun cycling cards, I could see someone trying to pull it off. But it's also nice because it's a mechanic that you could play just as one card in your deck could just have cycling on it, and it works really well. Those are my favorite mechanics, and you'll hear me talk about it a ton. My favorite mechanics are the ones that you can build a whole deck around them, or you can just take a one-of card in another deck and it works well. For instance, Companion, I mean, you have to build your whole deck around the Companion. Mutate, a lot of them say when this thing mutates, and it's not worth it to just get one trigger off of it, so your deck has to be completely built around Mutate. Now, that's not 100% true. There are some Mutate cards that you could just treat as an aura, and so that's why I think it could actually see a couple cards see play. But cycling, you can just have a one random card in here, and it doesn't need to have, like, a little gimmicky combo. It can just have cycling, and so I really like it. Next, I want to talk about ability counters. I saw a lot of people complaining about this, about, oh, how am I going to remember this? Actually, I think it's one of my favorite mechanics in the set. It feels so much like Magic. I was reading the cards with ability counters on them. I'm like, yes, this is just Magic. It would not surprise me if in a year or two, these become evergreen and we just see them all the time. I think that would be cool. Next, I want to talk about power level. So, looking at the power level, there are some very, very busted cards. For instance, today, I was just looking at Winota, who, whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library and throw a human from among them onto the battlefield, and that's for each creature that's attacking. An Agent of Treachery is actually a human, so you can expect to be attacked by a bunch of 1/1s, because I assume that deck is going to run a bunch of humans that create non-human tokens, and then you're going to attack with the non-human tokens, which are then going to shove a whole bunch of humans onto the board, including things like Agent of Treachery, all those really annoying things. So, and this is just from a standard perspective. Imagine this in other formats like Commander or Modern, or like, I could totally see a Winota deck. There are a ton of cards that just seem really powerful now, until the meta really forms, which is going to take a little bit longer than normal due to the COVID-19 crisis, because there is no paper Magic, at least in a lot of the world, to have, like, a lot of the tournaments were shut down, which is where a lot of the metagame forms. We'll still probably see it here soon, but in terms of power level, I think it could actually be a little bit less powerful than Theros. I think there are some very powerful cards, but Theros did something different to the meta, and I want to actually just shift into my next point of meta interaction. I think that Ikoria doesn't really make that many new decks. You might end up with a cycling deck here or whatever, but generally it's just going to be the same decks from Theros, but with new cards. It kind of builds on top of the current decks and does not make new decks, which I think that that's an interesting idea for a set, but I think it would be better to have a set, especially now, that just completely reinvents the standard metagame. Theros did that. Theros was like, oh, here's the metagame? Actually, no. I mean, Simic is still really big in it, but Theros completely reinvented it with a bunch of new decks. And so I enjoyed that. It actually, like, switched up the meta. It made it really fun. I think Ikoria is just going to be Theros plus a couple extra cards to make all the decks worse. Better, but, like, worse to play against. So, we'll have to see. Again, that one we're going to have to wait a little bit. But overall, I think that it's going to be not as powerful as Theros and not change the meta as much. Next, I want to talk about Limited. I've played a couple of Limited games, and those would be Draft on MTG Arena using Player Draft, and honestly, it has been really, really fun. I really like the drafting theme. Drafting Mutate seems fun, which is what I try to draft when I can, because I just love Mutate, and playing in a less powerful environment where there are less removal spells and less board wipes can be nice. So overall, I think that Limited is going to be really fun. I think that this is actually the first time that I'm actually playing on an MTG Arena, spending a significant portion of my gold on drafting. And that could have been just because of player drafting, and that could have added on top of it, but it was probably some of the most fun I've had in a draft in a very long time. So, yeah. Moving from Limited to lore, I want to talk about the lore a little bit. Now, I am no lore expert at all. I know the basis of most of the stories, but I don't know much beyond that. Now, Ikoria has a book, and I've heard good things about the book, although I've also heard that the book kind of not contradicts, but doesn't bring up some of the things that happen on the cards, like there's the Wanderer in a card, and I've heard Narset isn't in the book, so if that's the case, I really wish the cards were a little more sunk up, but that's not going to make or break the set for me. The trailer was pretty nice, although it was pretty much just Vivian fighting a monster and really didn't give us any story details besides the fact that, something evil's happening and someone has an evil plot, which is probably going to happen in a book, so especially a fantasy book. And of course, the story is better than Theros, because Theros, we got an article, and that was it. We also got, by the way, for Ikoria, we also got a one-page, or like a one-article long guide to being a Planeswalker in Ikoria, which is just a little bit of lore information for free. Yeah. So next I want to talk about MTG Arena and how it was implemented. So the MTG Arena update was one of the biggest updates we've seen to MTG Arena ever, and I actually really enjoyed the update. Now, I think Ikoria was added in a very good way. Everyone got a free draft. Everyone got 3 free packs. If you didn't, use code PLAYIKORIA. You'll get 3 free packs. And overall, I don't really have any complaints. I've not seen any issues. Mutate is very good looking in terms of how it works. I wish it was maybe a little bit more obvious how things look. I'll pull up a screenshot. You can't really tell how many times it's mutated without right clicking it and to see all of the cards that are attached to it. Now, it does have all the I think the way they do it makes sense for people who don't understand how Mutate works, so I think they did it really well. But for people who do understand how Mutate works, I want to see all the cards that are attached to it. Which when you do that, you have to right click and then click show mutations, and I think that's too many steps. I think you should either be able to just right click it or hover over it and it'll show you all the cards that are attached to it. But the way they do it is they basically just add on text to the existing card, which I think is how people need to understand the mechanics, so I think that works really well. I mean, there are a few bugs with the newest version, but overall it's pretty good. I mean, Brawler's Guild Hall started with a cost on it, but that's not really having anything to do with Ikoria. Overall, it was pretty good. Now, I'm going to move away from MTG Arena and talk about my top 10 favorite cards. So, these are just cards that I'm really excited for. This doesn't mean that these cards are the most powerful. These are just the cards I'm excited to play. And actually, a lot of the most powerful cards are on my top 10 least favorite cards, which we will talk about here in a second. So I'm just going to name them and pop them up on screen. So we have Luca, Coppercoat Outcast, very fun Planeswalker, Nethroi, Apex of Death, Eerie Ultimatum, Luminous Broodmoth, Riel the Everwise, Fiend Artisan, Lurrus of the Dream Den, Zagantha the Wellspring, the Ozolith, and Tricycle Land. So those are my top 10. Maybe they're not in that exact order, and some of them are some of the most powerful, but I'm excited to play with them. And then my top 10 least favorite cards, these are the ones that I'm not looking forward to playing against, is Fiend Artisan. So I'm excited to play Fiend Artisan. I'm just not excited to fight Fiend Artisan. Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, Winota, Joiner of Forces, Whirlwind of Thought, Ruminous Ultimatum, Song of Creation, Sky Cat Sovereign, Obush, the Prey Piercer, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and Colossification. So those are my top 10 favorite and least favorite. And then I want to talk about products. I am not a huge fan of all the Godzilla stuff. I mean, I'm going to use the styles in MTG Arena because I think they're better. I love using styles. I'm one of those people who enjoys having styles on their cards. I'm not going to go turn them off. I'm going to turn them on. I think that the collector boosters are still a little too complicated. I wish they were just oh, this is a normal booster, but all of the cards are foil. All of the uncommons have, if they are mutate, they have special art, and the rares are either a borderless planeswalker or a showcase card if they are one of those cards, and then you significantly lower the price. That's what I would do. Just make them much simpler. Also, another thing, there's no theme booster exclusive, which I think is a good thing. I think they saw that those weren't very good. Overall, the products seem pretty good. The Commander decks were pretty fun. I actually did a whole review covering those on Monday, so you guys should check those out. Now, I want to talk about my very last point, which is my comparison to Theros. I think that Ikoria is going to be more fun, but too complex. Theros, I think, was a perfect complexity level. Maybe it could have been a little more complicated, but Theros overall was pretty good. However, I didn't think it had that many fun cards. Even the gods weren't that fun. I was excited to play Klothys, and I'm oh, this is just a once a turn trigger. Whoa. So I think that these are going to be more fun, but a little too complex. It's interesting. We'll have to wait to see a little bit how it interacts with the meta. And yeah, if you guys want me to do a review later down the line when we see how this warps the meta, let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe. Also in the comments down below, let me know what you thought of Ikoria, your opinion on the mechanics, and maybe you have a different perspective. Maybe you only play Modern. Let me know what you think that these cards will do to the Modern metagame. Either way, hope you enjoyed. See you guys in the next video. Bye.